Welcome to Venture with Joe and Cody, where we take a deep dive into the minds of leaders and innovators making a real impact today. I'm Joe.
And I'm Cody. And we're here to bring you the raw stories, the successes, and the setbacks that these trailblazers have experienced in their journey to where they are today.
Every week, we sit down with a new guest who's ready to share their insight and advice on business, entrepreneurship, and making a difference in their community. From local community members to industry experts, you're going to get the unfiltered truth behind their success.
So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned professional, or just curious about the business world, join us for a journey of learning and inspiration.
So let's grab a drink, settle in, and let's get started. This is Venture with Joe and Cody. Hey guys, welcome to Venture with Joe and Cody. My name is Joe Skipper. I'm the owner of Skipper Realty Group, brokered by eXp Realty in Oregon. I'm with my buddy Cody Wilhelm with Residential Mortgage. How's it going, Cody?
Wonderful. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. We got a special guest that's like we just talked about. It's come down to our level of podcasts and to talk to us about some important topics. It's going to be a fun conversation. Adam Cunningham, how are you, my man?
Good. Thank you for having me on today, Joe.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Cody.
Yeah,
it's great to have you on. I know, we've known each other from sports in Wilsonville, and I think it's a kind of, perfect timing for the topic for us to chat with you today. I know you're running for City Council of Wilsonville, so you're in the community doing your thing. Also, you have a cool history, so I thought it'd be a cool topic to talk about, considering not that everyone likes talking about politics, and generally we don't either, but I think this is a good one, and I think it pertains to the local community, and I think it'll be good to kind of hear your thoughts on things and what your plan is for Wilsonville, so that people can kind of get an idea of what's going on. But let's just get started with a little bit of history on you and kind of let us know kind of where you were and how you got to this point today.
Sure. Well, I am one of those dirty Californians that moved up to Oregon.
End convo now.
I know, right? That's it. We're done.
Thanks for talking.
Luckily, I've got a little bit of street cred because my wife, Stephanie, she grew up here in Wilsonville. Her mom's from the Portland area. And so she, like her mom, went to California and found a husband and dragged him back to Oregon.
Nice.
So it's not my fault I'm here. She dragged me here. But so I was born in Southern California, grew up there, grew up in a household with my dad was a former Marine and a police officer in the city of El Cajon down there. And I always had the dream to follow in his footsteps. And so I did just that. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old. I turned 18 in boot camp. Actually, also with 9/11 yesterday, I experienced 9/11 from boot camp, which was a pretty surreal experience. So I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years. I got out as a sergeant and went on to become an El Cajon police officer, continuing to follow in my dad's boots. And I was with the El Cajon Police Department for 6.5 years. I worked all my time in patrol. And after 6.5 years, I was medically retired. And when that happened, my boys were 3 and 7 years old, and we were looking for a change of scenery. We wanted a better place to raise the family, and we had visited Wilsonville on trips up when my wife and I were dating, and after we were married, and with the grandkids and all that. And so Wilsonville is exactly where we wanted to be. And so we intentionally moved to Wilsonville because of the community, because it's just a beautiful little town. And so we moved up here in 2016 and jumped right in, got into the community, like you said, through sports. I joined the Little League board right away, and I've been on the Little League board for 8 years now, going into my 9th year right now. Just got reelected to a position there, and
That's probably the hardest job you've had, right? I feel like in some ways it could have been the hardest over police work.
Well, you're a volunteer, and you got parents that have their certain opinions. You got coaches that have their opinions, and everybody's got an opinion.
For sure, always.
Yeah, so I've coached every year in Little League and in baseball for both my boys. My older son now, he's 15. He's going into freshman year in high school. He's going to be playing baseball in high school, and so really good times. And then after we got up here, I worked at the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, the State Police Academy, for about 3.5 years, and did a lot of really good training that I was really proud of in mental health crisis response, de-escalation, and officer resiliency. So
Nice. So whereabouts in California was that, where you worked?
East County, San Diego, the city of El Cajon. A lot of people actually know El Cajon. It's a little town, but people know it's kind of got some notoriety, really.
Is that a good notoriety or a bad notoriety?
It's pretty bad notoriety. When we called it the vortex, because if something went down in San Diego, it always ended up in El Cajon somehow.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
it always gets sucked in.
I've only been down there once. Is that the same place that your dad worked, or where did he work?
Yep, he worked for the city of El Cajon, so I was
Really?
coming right into the same department he worked for. He retired after 28 years as a lieutenant.
So I don't know if you've already mentioned it. How did you and your wife get together, and what made Wilsonville particularly? Because it's obviously Oregon's a big state. What brought you? Did you want to stay close to the Portland metro area? How did you meet? Wife and all that stuff.
Yeah, so we met down in San Diego. She went to USD,
Okay.
and we met the old-fashioned way, drunk in a bar.
Nice.
And
Yep.
good thing for a good Catholic girl to do. No, we weren't drunk that night.
Oh yeah. You don't
that night.
that night.
So Wilsonville was because my in-laws live here in Wilsonville. They live in
Okay.
Charbonneau,
Okay.
and we wanted to move close to family. Family's important, and to keep them close. Even though we were moving away from my family, we wanted to have some family where we were going. And it's where my wife grew up, and she has friends and roots here, and
Okay.
it just seemed like the natural landing spot. And honestly, when we got up here in 2008, we were looking at the real estate market and looking at it was kind of expensive for what we were looking for, and we were kind of putting eyes up, looking over towards McMinnville and things like that, where things were a little bit cheaper at the time and get a little bit more for your money. And but we decided that we just wanted to make Wilsonville happen.
Yeah. We were Cody and I don't know if you know this, we were from Yamhill Carlton. So we were in the OG over by McMinnville when it was like not cool and not wine country.
Yeah.
Cody and I were
Yeah.
there. So, but we
Yeah.
had the same thoughts. We graduated, Christina and I graduated Oregon State, and thought the same thing. It's like, where to Wilsonville at the time, we bought terribly high, and then it
Smart.
tanked. We were really smart about it. But yeah,
Oh,
same
wait,
thing.
and you're giving people advice now?
It was a long time ago, man. Long time ago.
Lessons learned.
I was
lessons
young.
learned.
I was young and drunk. Like,
That's
but yeah, really, I'm very happy we moved to Wilsonville as well, because we looked at the same places, McMinnville, Newburgh, all that stuff, and ended up in Willie.
Yep, it's a great place to be.
So tell me a little bit before we get into kind of the city council stuff. I kind of am curious about what was your experience like as a police officer down there? Obviously Oregon, I think, is obviously a different. I was in law enforcement up here. I know it's completely different, especially in a big city like San Diego. What was that like in that time? In that time period, because I know things have gone, in my opinion, pretty south as a police officer, and I don't know, were you in a good time or a bad time there to be one?
So yeah, actually, that's an interesting question, because I was in around the time of the Ferguson riots and the Michael Brown shooting and all that stuff, and honestly, that was a big factor in what kind of drove me out of police work, because I looked forward and I saw what was kind of coming down the pipe with the 2020 stuff and just the kind of anti-police culture that was coming down the pipe. I saw that with the Michael Brown shooting, where, in my estimation, if you actually look at all the evidence of that situation, I didn't have a lot of disagreement with what happened in that situation, but it got blown up in a massive way. And I was really worried that I was kind of getting to the point where I was thinking, if I go to work tonight, I'm well trained. I know how to do my job. I do my job well. I do it with integrity. But I was afraid that if I did my job and I did it properly, and sometimes people need to be shot, and it's unfortunate that it comes to that. But I was worried that if I had to take that step to make sure I defended my life or somebody else's life, that I would end up being the next guy kind of crucified for his actions.
Yeah.
And if I hesitated because I was concerned about that I would end up dead. And then one way or the other, my kids wouldn't have a dad. And it got to the point where I couldn't do that anymore. It was this untenable situation.
Yeah, that process was, I was out. I was still in the state police, but I was out of the patrol, and we heard that a lot. That same sentiment from a lot of the road troopers that were like, I don't know what to do here. Like
Hmm.
a career that I thought, was I still enjoy and still going well. I'm afraid to do anything now, and I
Right.
just don't know if that's a mentality that, And this was long ago. I think it's even gotten personally. I think it's gotten worse. Um, I don't think it could. I don't think we thought it could get worse back then, but
Yeah.
I think it's continued to. So yeah. I guess your sentiment is the same as most people have had and probably still have. So, um, Cody, you got anything for him with the police work before we move on?
Um, Not necessarily with the police work, but I just wanted to let you know, Adam, I am familiar with El Cajon. I lived down in Oceanside for about 3 years, right out of high school. And coming from small town Yamhill, just anything outside of there, it was like awesome, right? Plus, we're just a little north of San Diego, and then over time, I realized that Oceanside wasn't quite what I thought it was when we first moved down there. You kind of start to get to know everything, and you're like, I mean, it was cool, it was a lot of fun, but
You start to see through the cracks a little bit.
you do. You're like, oh, this isn't nearly as nice as I thought it was when we first moved down there. You realize that there's definitely nicer areas, but yeah, I miss the weather down there. I miss the surfing down there.
Yeah, just too bad we can't all afford La Jolla and Coronado.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I want to know more about the city you guys are talking about, because I picture San Diego. I have that like naive, like it's perfect, and I need to know more about what sort of work was it like there? Was it pretty crazy, like crime wise? Was it pretty, how was it?
So El Cajon's a city of about 100,000 people. We were supposed to have 120 sworn officers. It honestly, it kind of reminds me a lot of Wilsonville to Portland. Same kind of distance from the big city. They ran mass transit out to El Cajon, and honestly, in my estimation, mass transit didn't help the crime issues that happened there. It created a vehicle for people who were living in the bigger cities and other areas to have a vehicle to go and visit our city, not to shop or to explore the wonderful tourism of El Cajon, but to engage in illicit activities. And it didn't seem to benefit El Cajon the way that I think they would have hoped. Also, San Diego had a lot of gang injunctions where they basically put gang members on geographical probation, where if they were seen on their block in San Diego, they could immediately be arrested and hauled off the jail. So what happened was a lot of the gangs kind of made El Cajon the neutral ground to do business, quote unquote. Obviously illicit business.
Yeah.
Including, selling drugs and pimping and all that stuff. And most of the time it was okay, but every once in a while they'd shoot at each other, just for funsies.
Yeah. Why not?
And we also had a courthouse in El Cajon. We had the parole and probation office in El Cajon. So there's a lot of things that surrounding resources that drew in, a certain element.
Yeah.
And it made for a very busy city for sure.
I was just going to say, must have kept you busy.
As a young, hard-charging cop,
yeah,
I had a great time.
Great time. Yep.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
When I started to grow up a little bit, though, and I started to really think about, hey, is it worth chasing this guy tonight? Because God knows what's going to happen. Got a little less fun.
I know. I think everyone gets to that point where it's like, when you start thinking that, when you see it, when you're pursued or you chase, and normally for years you're like, this is amazing, and the one time you're like, really, like all this paperwork, all this stuff that's going to come with this, it's like it might be time to kind of switch positions.
Yeah, and the possible negative outcomes that can come of it. And as you get older, you start to recognize those things. It's less, 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and more, hey, I got a family I got to live for.
Yep, they matter more. So maybe this transition with you with DPSST, it sounded like you went more into the mental health game with that training. Is that accurate? And what made you kind of go that route? What were you seeing, or what did you think you could contribute with that, with DPSST?
Yeah, so my exit from law enforcement didn't occur on my terms, unfortunately. I was medically retired for PTSD and anxiety due to stuff on the job and, different situations that I'd been in. When I was literally 1 month on the job, one of my partners, Jared Slocum, was shot and almost killed, and responded to that. And I realized when all this stuff, we talk about, one of the things we talk about in resiliency and mental health, especially with police officers, is we like to put everything in a box. We just put it in the box and put it away. Don't want to deal with it. It's too much. You just got to go out and keep doing the job. Well, I realized about 5 years later that my box was full and it was leaking. And a lot of stuff started coming up from different incidents that I'd been at, responded to, that I hadn't really dealt with and didn't do a good job and didn't really have the tools that I needed to deal with it. And so it kind of all came to a head, and to the point where the last night that I was supposed to go to work, I went to go get in my truck, and I sat in my driveway with my truck in reverse for 20 minutes with my foot on the brake, and I couldn't get my foot to come off the brake. It was incredible. And I never thought that could happen to me. I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? Former Marine, but then I was amazed by how many guys that I served with came to me. These guys, 6'2", 240-pound SWAT guys, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, I've struggled with that too. It's terrible." And I'm like, you're a badass. That doesn't happen to badasses. Rambo never dealt with PTSD. Yep. So unfortunately, the lack thereof of the lack of help that I got, there wasn't really good. I didn't really get a lot of good help when I came forward with my issues, and so it became it's a passion point of mine, and so the mental health crisis response kind of plays into it. But my biggest passion was the officer resiliency piece, and so being able to talk to young recruits at the academy. And just sharing, some of my old man knowledge, I guess. Yeah. And just kind of giving them a heads up, like, hey, this is okay. Like, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to go through a call after you see something terrible that most people could never even imagine. And it's okay to cry afterwards. It's okay to go talk to somebody about it. It's okay to go talk to one of your partners, talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist. God forbid you go sit down and talk about your feelings for a few minutes. Yeah. And so just kind of trying to bridge that gap and make it okay for this younger generation of cops to be able to survive a very, very difficult career that you're challenged with. You're challenged with life and death situations on a regular basis, and you're challenged with seeing things, like I said, that most people couldn't even imagine. And if you explain them to them, you don't explain a lot of stories in mixed company because a lot of people just don't know how to handle that. Yeah. And so that was really my big passion piece.
That's good. Yeah, I hope that they've improved on that. When I was leaving, they were kind of, starting to dip their toes in that water. And it just is you saw it, I saw it. It was just terrible to see. And I was affected. I almost lost my marriage multiple times based on just kind of my mindset. And it was like, the box, like you said, you just put it down until there's no room left. And then you make stupid decisions. And I think cops, you see the ramifications of some of those decisions online and think that's every cop. And yeah, it's unfortunate that it's one of those fields that, your feelings or your mental capacity is not cared about by any real agency. They don't focus on that and don't care because they want that 20-something-year-old to just go out balls to the walls and do their job. But then when you hit 5, 6, 7 years on to seeing that stuff, if you don't have the proper mentality, it can be really a bad thing.
So, yeah. Do you think that is, I don't have any type of police background or anything, but as far as resources go for stuff like that, do you think that is a financial issue? Why they're not quite there? Because obviously the PTSD, the issues that are being seen by officers, by military, by all these people that have to see all this stuff and be a part of it, it always feels like there's a lack of resources with that. Do you think that that's something that is they're just not able to invest financially, or is it just that, in years past, that was just kind of the way was just to pack it away and not deal with it and then retire and you're out and it's no longer part of their problem existing? Or do you feel like something has changed at all with that? Like, do you know if there's any more resources that are available, since you've been out of it?
There's a lot of talk about it. All the departments know that this is a national crisis for law enforcement. The numbers that we actually see of law enforcement officers that kill themselves is actually much lower than the actual number. One of my buddies, he actually founded the Cover Now Law Enforcement Fund, which is kind of an emergency law enforcement fund for people who are catastrophically injured or for the families of officers who lose their lives on the job or from suicide. And he's talking with him. The number of suicides for law enforcement is probably more closer to about 3 times higher than anything that's published, because he sees these people, he interacts with them, he gets the call to come help these families, and he tells me just how many of them are just never made public. Like you don't hear about them for a variety of reasons, right? And so the issue is a big issue, and it also reminds me of another guest you had on, Brian Flannery, another former police officer, and talking about his approach to security with his business. And he talked about in the interview about how making the investment ahead of time, getting in front of it, and when you guys were talking about kind of the sell of when a business has to cut something, he talked about security should not, that it tends to always be the first thing, but it should be the last thing that they cut. And it's kind of the same thing for this, where I believe that the law enforcement agencies need to make this resiliency, this mental health approach the last thing they cut, not the first thing.
Yeah.
And it needs to be the priority, because you have to make that investment in your officers. Every day that when your officers go out there, they are taking a toll. Their mental health is being stressed and told every single day. They give a little piece of their self that they maybe don't get back. And if you do that for long enough, you're no longer the young, fresh, productive police officer that you were when you were hired.
Yeah.
And a bigger investment in that, I think, pays dividends in the end. And I would love to see law enforcement agencies take it a lot more seriously in order to ensure the longevity of their people. Because every time that you have to replace somebody like me, it costs you money to retrain somebody, to get them out, run them through field training. Maybe they don't make it. You got to hire somebody new, new gear, all that stuff. And so I think law enforcement agencies could actually save money if they made a better investment.
Yeah, the bureaucracy gets tough because it's up top. They don't want to spend that money on the front end, not knowing that what's going to happen on the back end, or they don't care. Maybe they don't care what happens on the back end.
I would hope not.
I would hope not, but unfortunately that could be the case in some circumstances. And I think they would always say, no, that's not true. But when pedal hits the metal, it's like, where's the money to do that? And what are you doing proactively to stop these guys and gals from, hurting themselves down the road, or hurting even something as minor as the marriages, families breaking up, all that stuff. The suicide is the ultimate, the ultimate detriment, but just the families that are impacted by all that stuff and what they go through and all that sort of stuff. Super frustrating.
Right. Well, and you don't leave work at home, or I'm sorry, you don't leave work at work, and you don't leave home at home. And so when work starts to affect home starts to affect work, and you get into this cycle.
Yeah.
And it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and I think the metrics are there for the mental health thing to improve. I think with the threat assessment, with Brian and stuff, it's always hard for companies to judge that you're successful, because it's like, well, you didn't have anything happen, that's success. But companies
Right.
how do we say that was because of your threat, prevention, or was it just naturally just safe? And I think with mental health, I think there was that stigma, that kind of thought process as well, of like, well, how do we measure? If we put a ton of money in on the front end, how do we measure that on the back end? Everyone's fine. So yeah, going along with your point, it's a tough one to measure metrics wise of like, we did this is what we saw in return. I think you can see that, but it takes a long time to kind of get that data. But
yeah, I'll send you an article that my buddy Jeff Stein with Cover Now Law Enforcement Fund sent me. It really explains well how many thousands of agencies there are. And so we can't really pinpoint how big of a problem police suicide is because of that.
Yeah.
Whereas the military, we know exactly what the problem is, or how big the problem is in the military, because there's kind of, one big Department of Defense that oversees all of it. Whereas police agencies are kind of out all working separately.
yeah.
So
Before we move on to something else, I just have a question regarding that. I found a lot of that coinciding the military side of things with the police and the law enforcement. And I don't think we did a good enough job at separating the military and their roles and their goals and their responsibilities. And we let it bleed too much into that police work, which I think goes with the mental health side of things. I think the military has a different view of the soldiers and what happens with them. And I think police it bleeds into the police of that same mentality that we are soldiers on the battlefield. And in a way, I can see that, but we're not. In that same way. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. With that military aspect bleeding into police work, making it think that it's a military institution. And I think there's problems that come with that, I think, in a civilian life.
And there's the paramilitary aspects to the police force. We go by similar ranks, and there's a rank structure, and you get marching orders, and you go do what you're told, and all that stuff. And I think there's a certain amount of that that's necessary and needed for the mission to be successful in police work. I definitely worked with some people who came in with that bigger military attitude, and they were much less effective in being police officers, because you have to be able to talk to people like they're human beings, and you have to be a human being first, in my estimation. As a police officer, there's plenty of times that it's time to pull out the gun and pull out the big voice and give commands and order people to do stuff and, get after it. But more often than not, you have to be a human being who just happens to be wearing a uniform that day, and have conversations with people who are probably having one of the worst days of their life, and understand that and meet that person kind of right where they're at that day, to be able to get the best outcomes possible from that situation.
For sure. So, okay, we're moving on. We're going to move to the current topic now. Okay.
There we go.
So you're running for city council. This is a big deal in the city of Wilsonville. So, tell me kind of what got you into it? What made you say, hey, this is something that I need to take that step? Because most people are like, I do not need this in my life, whether I want to make a change or not. Because I know that you are for just as many people that are like, we love that you're doing it. You have equal amounts of people that like to voice their opinion in a negative way. So what made you think, well, maybe not the same, but you know what I mean? You know what I mean? You have to hear that what comes with that positiveness is also going to come with the naysayers and that stress of that as well. So what made you say, hey, let's go for it and let's do it?
Kind of like I've outlined, with the Marine Corps police, serving as an instructor at the State Police Academy, and things that I think are super important to our neighborhoods and our communities and our society. Going on 9 years of service with Little League. I've always been called to serve. I joined the Marine Corps because I wanted to serve the country that gave me so many opportunities and gave me the opportunity to live in the United States of America. I serve my community as a police officer because it's just my personality. I've been called to serve. And this is just kind of the next step in that, I think. I felt called to do this. It feels like the right time. It feels like the right opportunity. Given that I was medically retired, I'm in a unique situation where I have the time and ability to do this. And I think that the skill sets that I have with all that training and all the stuff that I've done, leadership, learning leadership in the Marine Corps, learning how to talk to people as a police officer, like on their worst day. One of the best stories that I ever heard from a recruit at the State Police Academy was when we asked, like, hey, how'd you get so good at learning to talk to people? He said, I was in the financial industry during the recession. And, it gives you a lot of tools to be able to talk to people in rough situations. Yeah. And so I have kind of all those things on board. And I have an interest in really making sure that Wilsonville just maintains its livability and quality of life, so that, we can continue to raise our kids here, and hopefully one day they can raise their kids here in town, and just keep it just a beautiful, vibrant community that we've come to expect.
So what are some of the things that you're, if you get elected, what's some of the things that you want to focus on, or what do you see as kind of not necessarily problems maybe, but things that could be improved within Wilsonville?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, probably one of the biggest ones when I go out and I talk to people at community events and things like that. Probably the number one thing that I hear from people is they're concerned about the traffic in town. Nobody likes the traffic that gets bogged down. Wilsonville is known for its traffic. We're the butt of jokes for traffic. People hear that I live in Wilsonville, they go, "Oh my God, how do you deal with the traffic?" First thing out of their mouth every time. So traffic, but traffic didn't just happen overnight. We've Wilsonville has grown at just breakneck speeds for decades. Since the 1980s, it's grown from a couple thousand people or a few thousand people. From 1980 to 1990, it grew 150%. And it was over 100% for the next decade after that. It was in like the 50 percentile in the decade after that. And from 2010 to 2023, we grew 42%. Over just that 13-year period. The rest of the region and the state grew at 12%. So we've grown at just breakneck speeds, and our infrastructure, we feel it now. Our streets have not kept up. There's some current plans that are in place right now to build high density housing in the city of Wilsonville, in the heart of Wilsonville, right into our town center loop, and those are pretty concerning to me. And they're really concerning to me because I'm not sure that we're being sold the actual bill of goods that we're being offered. There's conflicting reports on how many residences are going to be built in town. And I sat down with city staff, and city staff told me that there could be over 4,000 residential units built in our town center. That's not what we've been being told. And so I also feel like there's kind of a lack of transparency and openness. I'm a very open person. I'm a very transparent person. And I'm very interested in making sure that citizens are well informed. I want to try to bring citizens in and have them and help them engage in the process and really become educated in what's going on in our city. Because with that, we create healthy discussions and healthy arguments over the topics and what's going on. And that leads to better outcomes overall.
And are you seeing any pushback from any of the current status quo type people, or are you seeing an openness to that? Or that's a very open-ended question.
It's very open-ended. But yeah, I am feeling pushback from that. In fact, I gave public testimony at City Council on August 5th, and the September issue of the Boones Ferry Messenger, our local taxpayer-funded newspaper, referenced in the myth-busting section, referenced false claims being made, and they cited public testimony as one of those sources. And I'm the only person who's talked about it. So I also kind of took
to draw the conclusion of who.
Yeah. So I also kind of take issue with that, because what I said, what I'm basing everything I base it. I don't make things up. I'm probably not smart enough to make up these things. I'm not here to run some sort of misinformation campaign. I go into their reports, I read their reports, and I take the numbers from them, and that's what I'm using. I've approached city staff and asked questions about it, and they've been hesitant, I would say, to give direct answers to my questions.
Is the traffic the hot topic that you're seeing? Or, obviously it is the hot topic, but is there any other things that are going on in Wilsonville that kind of need to be addressed or are being addressed well? Or what are you hearing from the city, just the actual people?
From like the citizens of the city?
Yeah. Obviously traffic, I live here and it's terrible, but that would be number one for sure. But anything else?
Other concerns are kind of the feeling of rising crime and homelessness coming to Wilsonville. Homelessness is a huge topic that, we will never be able to solve homelessness as the city of Wilsonville. No. We don't have the resources. It's a much, much bigger topic. And it's kind of one of those issues that we tend to kind of just push it around. I'm sure as a police officer, you probably saw it, but there's very few like really good solutions for it that are going to get the job done today. But people have complained about the rising feeling of crime. We've had some residential burglaries in town in the last couple months, and apparently I just heard yesterday that they caught the suspect. He's a career criminal, and ransacking nice nice little suburban residential neighborhoods. And that's concerning for people. People don't want to see that kind of, some people call it the Portland creep coming into Wilsonville. We want to try to keep kind of Wilsonville.
Yeah. So is there anyone, are you competing with anyone or campaigning against anyone or for anyone? How is there people in the running with you?
Yes. So right now there's 2 seats open for the city council. Neither of the incumbents are running. Which is nice because running against an incumbent is a much harder issue. So it's myself, a lady named Ann Shevlin, who lives in Charbonneau. She's the Charbonneau Country Club president. Another lady named Elizabeth Peters, and another lady named Ginger Fitch.
Okay. So you've got a pretty competitive then. Normally it's whoever signs up, right? It seems like that historically.
Yeah, actually 2 years ago, that's what happened. We had 2 council members who took council seats who ran unopposed, by no fault of their own. I wish I would have run in that one. It might have been an easier election.
I know.
But like I kind of said a minute ago, one of the things I think we lost 2 years ago when that happened was we never had the opportunity as a community to come together and compare our ideas and to have those discussions and sometimes disagreements, in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
Because now, I think there's 4 years of pent up, frustrations of people now. And we're seeing some of that with these discussions, and most of them that I see are still healthy, and productive. I think, people are sharing their ideas about what they want to see their city be or become.
Yeah. So what would you, not to put you on the spot too much, but you probably already answered this before, is like, what are you seeing? What's your opinion on this, the high density stuff? What's your vision for Wilsonville in the future to not only gain population, which helps the economy, but also to manage that properly in the sense that we don't, I have my own personal beliefs of throwing 4,000 people in a town center loop. But yeah, what's your vision with it?
Yeah, so I think that, given the growth that Wilsonville's experienced, just breakneck speeds, the way that we've actually built out our types of residents, we have about a 50-50 split in single family and multifamily housing here in town. We on average, we lead the rest of the metro region in that split of, nobody else has as much. The average is about 30% multifamily housing. So we've fallen behind from a regional perspective on single family homes. And one of the fastest ways to generational wealth is home ownership.
Yeah.
And without that, people fall behind, not just in the short term or midterm, but in the long term. And so that has to become some part of our focus of housing again. Now there's some state laws and things like that control what we're allowed to do and how those things can happen. And I'm aware of those, but we shouldn't be, we're currently subsidizing a lot of this density too. We're trying to subsidize it. In May, the voters turned down the funding mechanism for town center, urban renewal. And I think that part of that is people that don't want to subsidize adding all this density into town. And I agree with them. Our taxpayer money shouldn't be made to pack more people in, increase traffic, make it worse, and lower our livability and our quality of life. What we can do, though, is we have some, unused commercial areas, the Basalt Creek area, for example. It's ripe to be developed. But the city also has to approach it in a way that's going to make it acceptable and able for developers to come in and get the loans they need to actually go in there and do something with it. It's pretty tightly zoned right now, and not in real attractive ways. And I think we could do a lot more with that and bring in some really good partners. Sherwood's done a really good job with that. They've brought in some, robotics, manufacturing, and a lot of good varieties of really strong businesses that have high paying, livable wage jobs that would be just what we would want for the people that live here.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. For some of those people that don't know, or maybe myself, can you give like a bullet point, like city council, what would be kind of the main duties or main roles, or give me a quick little like summary of what that looks like for you. Like if you were to get it, what does kind of your day-to-day look like, or maybe not day-to-day, but like what is the overall scope of work in that position?
Yeah, well, for me, and I might approach it a little bit differently than maybe how some other people are or would do it. But for me, right now, running for office has been an amazing experience. I've gotten to go out and meet people that I never would have met. You don't normally walk up to people on the street and say, "Hey, what's your issue?"
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of seems a little forward. So, but being able to do that, you start to learn people's stories. You start to figure out what is really impacting their lives and start to think about how to create solutions for that. I've heard amazing stories from people. I'm about to go meet a gentleman and go on a 7 mile walk with him next Friday, just to kind of see from his perspective what's going on in the city and what his concerns are. And I plan to do that. I plan to continue to do that after being elected. I want to stay absolutely involved in the community, be checking in with people, and being just completely available and approachable for anybody in the city that feels like something's going on that they need some attention for. But kind of the more formal part of that, city councilors are really decision makers at the end of the day. You have issues that come up regarding how the city's going to operate, and you have to decide what is going to be the best decision to make. I come into this with an idea of how to make those decisions. Number one, every decision has to start with Wilsonville being the priority. We have to make the current citizens of Wilsonville the number one priority in the decision-making process. Number two, we have to make sure that we're spending our neighbors' money wisely. Number three, we have to make sure that we are respecting property rights. And then number four, we have to make sure that we're being transparent and open in the process so that we're basically, it's a fair system for everybody who wants to be involved in it. And so, kind of on that more formal side of it too, it's going to be reading hundreds of pages of reports and making sure to understand those issues inside and out, asking questions with city staff to get clarification on what that means and what those issues are and what we can and can't do with them. But then I think for a big part for me is going to be to address the public directly and make sure that they feel like they have a voice and that they're being represented properly in our city.
That's great, man. So do you, I'm not going to take too much more of your time, but do you have, do you need donations? How does this political process work in a city level versus like, the presidential level? What are we talking about?
Yeah. I definitely don't have to raise millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But money does help to run a successful campaign. It does pay for yard signs. It does pay for advertisements. It does help to get your butt in that seat.
Yeah.
So donations are always welcome. My website is coming up shortly. The website address is www.adamforwilsonville.com, all spelled out words. And people would be able to find a donation link on there. Also find out more about, me and my stances on the priorities and the issues, as well as, getting the link to this podcast and all that stuff. And, just kind of being an interaction point. And the other thing too is when I hand out my information, I hand out my business card. It has my personal cell phone number and my personal email on it. I want people to have that access to me. If they want to text me with a concern or question, or they want to give me a call, try not to call me in the middle of the night. I'd like to get sleep. But if they have a question or comment or something, I'm an open book and I want to hear it and I want to be able to be accessible.
That's great, man. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate your friendship and I appreciate you being on. Hopefully we can reach some people and get an idea of what you're about and what you want for the city of Wilsonville. And glad you put the website on there and people can head over to your website to learn more and to potentially donate. So thank you for your time. Cody, you got any final words or anything? Or are you good?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say thank you for your time and thank you I don't live in Wilsonville, but Joe and I joke about it. Oregon is my home, even though I live in Washington, but I appreciate your transparency and the willingness to put your phone number out there and your email out there, because I know, in the political world or just the bigger, as you get bigger, whatever industry it is, you tend to want to kind of like hide away a little bit and have less access to people. So I just really appreciate that, because I think that transparency is great, especially like regardless of where you live, or I think it's good to be able to have access to those people so you don't feel like you have to jump through 20 hoops to get to somebody that you can finally ask a question to or address an issue. So I just appreciate that for me. Just a human perspective on things. So thanks again for being on here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.